Hello, hello. It's great to see you again, and welcome back to another installment of Wealth Insights with Mitch Silberman. I'm your host and moderator, Ryan Ruff. We've got Mitch standing by. He'll be joining me momentarily. But look, first and foremost, we want to thank you for finding your way back here to the show. As you know, in all our prior episodes, Mitch and I, we dive into a new wealth management related topic. Each episode, we tap into Mitch's experience within this realm. And of course, we pluck out some insights, some wealth insights, hence the name of the show. Now, Mitch and I have discussed this topic a little bit in our prior episodes, in that we were going to spend a lot of time in future episodes diving into the various facets of this overall overarching topic in family wealth. Today, we're going to kind of give you kind of an overview on one particular strategy that I think you'll like in really aligning the viewpoints when it comes to wealth of all the members within a given family, utilizing this document, this framework known as a family constitution. So Mitch is going to tell us about the document itself, and we're going to get into the inner workings of why it's so beneficial that he sees with a lot of affluent families today. But look, first and foremost, to kind of set the frame for this is just think about affluent families over the top right now. They're obviously looking to manage their wealth so that it achieves a few different goals. First of which, they want to continue to grow their wealth, of course. They want to make sure that it's matriculated down to their heirs when the time comes. Of course, they want to protect that wealth from, those looking to take it unjustly. And then, of course, they want to make sure that their wealth is being used for the values and the goals that the family wants to achieve, right? So given all those different goals, often the best place to start in attacking those goals is to make sure that everybody in the family is aligned and on the same page when it comes to what they want for their wealth. So that being said, let's go ahead and bring Mitch on today to get the conversation rolling and really walk through what this idea of a family constitution looks like. So Mitch, great to see you. Welcome aboard. How are you doing today?
Always great to be with you, Ryan.
Hey, I'm glad to have you back here on the show, and we're going to dive into this idea of the family constitution. But I think before we get into the document itself, I think we start with a little bit of a high-level overview, Mitch. In your experiences, what kind of unique challenges are you seeing that arise when families with wealth attempt to work together to manage those assets?
It's a big question.
Sure.
When we grow up, we all aspire to be wealthy, however you define that. And once that happens, usually through a lot of sacrifice, hard work, risk taking, you achieved wealth. The family dynamic makes it challenging. I think it was Warren Buffett that said something to the effect of he wants to give his kids enough money that they can do something, but not enough that they can do nothing. So it does become complex. And I've always believed the success leaves clues. The super rich have been using this concept of a family constitution for a long time. And in its basic sense, it's look, we've done well. We're very blessed, but let's get at least in writing or understanding of the values that we share, what we find is important, how we're going to manage this wealth, how we're going to preserve the wealth, how we're going to pass on the wealth, how we're going to protect the wealth. So it's really bringing in the family so that everyone's on the same page as much as possible.
Sure, I appreciate that. And Mitch, when looking at these wealth issues that you see popping up among families with significant assets, are there any specific issues you could share with us? Like, what do some of these issues look like when you're looking at a family with significant assets?
There, it's very touchy issues because what I find is that many of the wealthy today are what I call immigrants to wealth. They created it themselves. They worked hard, they took risks, and they're living the American dream. And so their children are not immigrants to wealth, they're natives to wealth. They've grown up only being wealthy. So for a lot of the parents, they're like, well, how do we navigate this? At what age do the kids start knowing that they're wealthy? And then are there limitations? Do we spoil them? Do we make them have jobs? How much do we want them to know about our wealth? Because obviously you want to bring up wonderful, productive children. So the money aspect is different, especially if the children's friends maybe aren't as wealthy. So there's a lot of issues involved, and that's why I think it's incumbent that they bring in experts.
Mm-hmm.
There are true experts out there. You start with the wealth manager, who kind of is the quarterback that puts everyone on the same page. But I think it's really crucial that you bring in experts on all these matters and start talking it through. Open communication is crucial.
Sure, Mitch. You bring up a good point on communication. So let's start there. When looking at communication among family members, you had given us that high level surface, view of the family constitution in and of itself. But talk to me a little bit about how this family constitution really does focus on using communication to better promote these relationships within the family, especially when the relationships and the ideals that are entailed within the family constitution are pertaining to the wealth itself. So, walk me through how communication plays a big role within the family constitution.
Well, I think it really starts when I work with clients, and I always start with their goals. Where they are, where they would like to go, what's important to them in life, ultimately, so they can live an amazing life of significance. So then we start talking about the children, and obviously, depending on how old the children are, if they're tiny, teenagers, are they adult children? But I want to start with, well, how do you want your children to be involved with this? And they really should be involved to some extent. The You hear horror stories that sometimes the first true idea of wealth that children have as of their parents is when the parents are gone, and all of a sudden they say, how much money do we have? And that's kind of a bad way to begin.
Mm-hmm.
So you want to have a discussion about money, about what it means, about lifestyle, about values. I often say you want to pass on your values, not just your valuables, to your children. So starting with the parents and having the communication, and then bringing the children involved, facilitating discussions about the wealth and the blessing of it, the potential challenges of it. We all know stories about people who came into wealth and blew it all, ruined their lives, whether it's drugs. There's so many terrible things that can and do happen. So we want to get ahead of those things and try to make sure the family functions as a unit. There's a consensus. They're working together. They actually feel heard. That's very important. Everyone involved needs to feel heard. Doesn't mean they're going to be right,
Mm-hmm.
but you want to get everyone involved, everyone having a stake in this thing, and then set up on the calendar regular meetings, not just, well, we had this family constitution concept. Was it 7 years ago? No good. It's got to be something regular on the calendar because life changes quickly.
Sure, sure. So anybody in our audience right now, Mitch, is probably thinking, okay, yeah, this sounds pretty good. It makes sense to just have this collective document, this framework
Mm-hmm.
that gets everybody on the same page. But where do you begin? Where do you start that process of ultimately drafting such an important document? This it's going to really lay the foundation of how the entire family looks at the wealth, treats it, views it moving forward. Where do you
Sure.
start, and what steps do you take to go about drafting this family constitution?
Well, Ryan, the easy answer to that is I have a little running joke when someone asks me a question and I don't know. I always say, I don't know, but you know who knows? Google knows, right? So the easy way you can start, not necessarily the best way, but the easy way to start is by Googling it, family constitution, or how do the wealth, help keep their family together, just to kind of educate yourself. But ultimately, I think you really bring in outside help. People who are experts, and there are people who are true experts in this area. But start with your current relationship, your current wealth advisor. If you're working with someone who's really great at this, first of all, that's fantastic. And you can say to them, hey, look, my kids are getting older. I've heard this idea of a family constitution. Is that something you, our wealth advisor, can help us with? And if the wealth advisor says, not really, that's okay. But they're going to I know for me, I have a very extensive, high level professional network of people I can tap into. And what I realize is that there's no one in the world that knows the answers to everything. Okay. But if you have a team you can trust, you can start bringing in the right professionals to help guide you. But get it in writing. The family constitution is not necessarily a legal document, but it's a guiding principle of what this family values, how you're going to govern, how you're going to resolve issues, how you're going to keep the wealth together, the family together, hopefully talk about how you resolve problems before they arise. So really, just like you hire an attorney, you hire an accountant, you hire a wealth manager, you may have to hire someone to help you draft this family constitution. And that's great. It's well worth it.
It's all about having the right professionals around you in instances like these. And Mitch, I think one thing that I do want to circle back to was that you mentioned how everybody in a family should be heard, and that's very important when it comes to this process. But not only is it important that they get heard, but walk me through the in this development of the family constitution, who from a given family should be involved in these discussions, and then ultimately be in charge, or really, leading the effort to get this document created, and then make sure that the family adheres, to the document
Sure.
after it's done. So who's involved in these conversations from a given family? Is it just the matriarch and patriarch, or what are we looking at here?
Well, I listen, when I work with couples, um, this involves both of them. And I'll often hear things like, oh, my husband handles the financial affairs. Well, maybe, but it's the wife's family, it's the wife's life, it's the wife's financial affairs too. So really both have to be involved. It really, you can't do proper planning unless both spouses are involved. Very, very
Hmm.
important. Obviously, depending on the age of the children. If the children are tiny, well, I mean, if they're 2 or 3, they're not going to be involved at all. But
Sure.
if they're young, listen, I went to my kids' school and I was brought in by the math teacher to talk about investing for the kids when they were in 5th grade. And I was astonished how well engaged and informed these 5th graders were. So even at a young age, get the kids involved. You can ask their kids, what charity or causes are important to you?
Hmm.
And wouldn't that be something to get them to start thinking about using that money to make a world a better place? If you're blessed with financial abundance, and the children, even at a young age, say, I love this charity, I love this cause, then wow, isn't that great to have the kids excited, not about having money, but having that money to do good in the world? So I really encourage the matriarch and patriarch, as you put it, to get the children involved, and you speak to them at their level, obviously. But you do that at a young age, you're really increasing the odds of having a good, solid family unit, using that money for good, and of course, preventing all kinds of disasters that we all know about that happen all the time.
Right, right. I love that, Mitch. Getting kids involved in these discussions early on can only lead to more beneficial outcomes and conversations down the road. But and one another quick thing I want to circle back to that you briefly mentioned, but I want to make sure our audience understands it is talk to me
Mhm.
about how how formal of a document this is. Is this a legal document or is this more of like a set of guidelines and principles? Like I want to make sure we hit this clearly for everybody.
Right. Given I am not an attorney, I would have to say it's probably not a legal document. I think it's a guiding principle for what matters to this family, what we envision for our future, because you want to have an amazing life of significance, not just for you and your spouse, but your children too. So I wouldn't advertise it to the children that, kid, this is not a legal document. Why say that? Right.
Mm-hmm.
Instead, you say, this is how we do things in our family. This is what matters. This is the guiding principle, the values that really we cherish and that we're going to abide by. Because you know what? There's going to be challenges in life. That's the way life works. And at least we have this family constitution to help put us and keep us on the right track. So I think if the kids realize, hey, mom and dad put together this document. We talk about it somewhat regularly. We meet with some outside professionals. A kid is not going to ask, is this legal? A kid is going to say,
Mm-hmm.
well, this is important to mom and dad. I guess it's important to me. And it gets them thinking about things about other than themselves, which is really, really good.
Sure, sure. And Mitch, obviously, as we've seen over even the last 2 years, 3 years, 10 years, circumstances change, and boy, can they change rapidly for a given family. So, talk me through what this document looks like as time goes on. What can a family do to make sure that the document remains relevant to their current circumstances, but also that it's adhered to by the family as time goes on and these circumstances change?
Sure. And that's a key word, Ryan, is relevant. I
Mm-hmm.
think having regular, what we call in my practice, regular progress review meetings. Are you on track to achieve all that's important to you? So I think if you say, hey, kids, we're going to set up a family constitution, and the kids are going to say, okay, what's that? And you explain, well, these are things that are important to mom and dad. I think they're important to you. And as you'll see, we've done well in life, and we want to make sure that we not only preserve what we have, but pass it on and prevent it from being unjustly taken away from us. And so I think that if it's a regular type of occurrence, it could even be once a year. You could revisit things. Is this still true? Do we still care about these charities? In light of potential disaster that happened, maybe we should modify this. I mean, life changes. As we all know, you could be the super rich and no longer part of the super rich. You could be struggling and strike it big. So life is always changing, and it's important that you keep that family unit together. And you
Mm-hmm.
know that money is certainly not the most important thing in the world, but the lack of it can be very troubling, especially in uncertain times like now.
Sure, sure. Completely understand that. And Mitch, one thing that you and I have touched on in prior episodes is not only the importance behind having a manager as for affluent families, but also how important that relationship it is. And I know that you and your team, you take, you jump leaps and bounds to make sure that that relationship is beneficial for both parties. And then of course that everyone is on the same page and really looking out for everybody's best interest on both sides of that table. So that being said, given this conversation, let's say a given family, a client of yours is thinking about pursuing, this strategy of a family constitution.
Mhm.
How can you, their wealth manager, go about, helping them through this process? Not only from identifying those values and concerns and whatnot for the family, but then going through the process of developing the document, revisiting. What is your role as a wealth manager within this family constitution dynamic?
Yeah, that's a really big question, Ryan. I've always lived by the motto that people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care.
Mm-hmm.
And when you sit down with families, and there are a lot of really good financial advisors out there. There really are. I mean, at the very basic level, you have an investment advisor who makes great investment recommendations. At a higher level is more of a financial planner, and then you have wealth management, which is really all encompassing. And I think when you start working with families in the arena of wealth management, you realize that the blinders are off. It's not just, okay, this is how your investments did. Well, that's just part of the puzzle. Really is, what are your goals? What's important to you in life? How can we help you live an amazing life of significance? So let's develop a plan for that. Then you pick investments. So when you start talking to the family about, I'm your wealth manager, and wealth is so many things, much more than just your investments. And you start talking about, let's talk about a family constitution. Let's talk about charitable giving. Let's talk about protecting your wealth from being unjustly taken. Let's talk about minimizing taxes, of course. I think people realize that, wow, there's so much more to this than simply picking a few good investments. Okay. So I promise you, the ultra wealthy, the billionaires out there, do you think that they throw everything they have into a few investments and cross their fingers and say, I hope it all works out? Well, of course they don't. And we know that. So you want to emulate them. And you know that, hey, they probably have a written plan. They have top notch advisors. They're talking about all the things that impact their family. And that's why having a wealth management relationship is so crucial to those that have done well in life.
I love that, Mitch. And in as we kind of bring our conversation to a head here, and in your dealings with family constitutions, maybe having some of these conversations with clients in the past, I think one thing that would be beneficial for our audience, because we've thrown a lot at them in regards to this family constitution, if you could just maybe bottom line it for us one final time on some of those key reasoning behind why a family should either A, consider this, B, implement it, and C, make sure that it's adhered to over time. Just bottom line it for us.
Well, I have to go with the assumption that if you've done well in life and you have a family, that you love your family, and you want to do what's best for them. You want to do what's best for not only you and your spouse, but your children. And if you think down the road, future generations to come. Books have been written that since the beginning of time, no matter what continent, what era, they have shirt sleeves to shirt sleeves in three generations, meaning, grandma or grandpa came from the old country with nothing. Typically, they'll come to America and they build up a nice empire, and then their children grow up wealthy, and then those children's children kind of run through the money. So we want to avoid that. So the whole idea is, what can we do? Yes, there are great investments out there. Yes, we have some great planning and strategies ideas out there. Of course there are. But more importantly, what are your values? What do you want your family to know about you? What do you want your grandchildren to say about you? Do they want to say, I heard grandpa and grandma were really wealthy and now we're poor? So really it's planning and putting it in writing to do everything possible to make your family life successful, to help you all live an amazing life of significance, and of course, avoid common costly mistakes. Planning, communicating, putting that in writing with the right guidance can have a profound impact on your life and maybe for generations to come.
So, Mitch, as we're kind of bringing our conversation to a head today, if anybody out there in the audience is listening to our conversation surrounding the family constitution and they're interested in maybe just reaching out to you and your team to talk a little bit more about what this looks like, how should somebody go ahead and, go about getting in touch with your team to start this conversation?
Well, as usual, the easiest way is to go to our website, www.silbermanwealth.com. It's SILB as in billion, ERMAN, silbermanwealth.com. Uh, I love to talk about these things. We can schedule time to chat. Whether or not we work together, I'm glad to try to add value to the situation, help put you on the right path. So reach out and set a time for us to either meet in person or via Zoom or on the phone.
But Mitch, thank you so much for jumping aboard with us today. Really appreciate you, and I'm looking forward to having you back.
Always great to be together.
Alrighty, and hey, look, we want to take one final moment to thank you, our audience, of course, for jumping aboard here for today's conversation. As always, if you liked what you saw, you liked what you heard, please feel free to comment on the show, subscribe to the show on whichever platform that you're checking us out on, and then, of course, share this information with friends or family. At the end of the day, these are Mitch's wealth insights that we're plucking from his experiences in working as a wealth manager in this space. And of course, we've got some great conversations ahead that we don't want you to miss out on. So for Mr. Mitch Silberman, I'm Ryan Ruff saying so long, and we'll see you on the next edition of Wealth Insights.